everyone, welcome back to Camp Conversations, where we are shifting away from our Parenting Edition series and into the main focus of our work, which is the keys to resiliency. The majority of the workshops that we have been running lately are with frontline professional staff, teachers, doctors, nurses, youth care workers that are suffering from burnout, doing the jobs that they are extremely passionate about. Our passion is helping these frontline staff members remain resilient so they can continue giving back to their communities in ways that fill them up, doing the things that they are born to do, that they are passionate about, and continuing to have work-life balance. So from here on out, our podcasts at Camp Conversations are going to be focusing on the keys to resilience. I'm going to start off by telling you the story of where I discovered as a teacher that I needed to work on my own resilience so that I could show up the best for my students. I am going to share with you today one story of where I discovered I didn't have great resilience as an educator supporting students and that I needed to put something in place to improve my own resilience so I was full from within and able to handle the challenges that my students brought for me. It's a practice that I continue to work on as a clinical counselor. So by the end of this podcast, you will have one activity that you can start using right away to start building up your own resilience. In 2011, I was an educator in New Zealand. I was just finishing up a teaching practicum when the massive earthquake hit Christchurch. At the time, I was in a practicum in Christchurch at a high school. And after the main event, there were aftershocks that kept rolling through. And I remember this one day in particular where an aftershock rolled through. By this time, all of the students knew that as soon as there was an aftershock, they had to dive under the desk. My supervisor was with me on this particular day, and we both went under the desk at the front of the room to protect ourselves from falling debris in the classroom. And this supervisor turned to me and looked me in the eye and said, "This is your firsthand experience that as an educator, you are the frontline staff for any challenges that happen within your community, and you have none of the training." That really resonated with me, and it started a big curiosity in my own brain of what would that training be. As the days continued on and I kept doing my practicum and there remained all of these earthquakes, aftershocks from the original earthquake, I realized that I wasn't doing so well. I was relying on substances to help me stay calm. I was having trouble staying connected with my friends and family that were overseas back in Canada. I had difficulty getting out of bed. I had difficulty sleeping. And I didn't really know why I was having such a hard time. And I felt a lot of shame and guilt around having such a hard time when I had friends and colleagues who were impacted by the earthquake even greater than I was, and were showing so much more resiliency than I was, and were taking extra steps to give back to the community beyond just showing up and teaching every day. And so another curiosity formed in my head. Why was I not resilient to this earthquake when I have had exposure throughout my life to many challenging events? And why were some people so resilient, some of whom, after I talked to, hadn't had gradual exposure to challenging events to build their resiliency? In counseling, we often focus on gradual steps of exposure to a stimulus so that we can build resiliency. So, for example, if I'm scared of snakes, which I am scared of snakes, then my gradual exposure would first be, okay, maybe go to a museum and check out snake skin, maybe feel comfortable touching it, or maybe a step before that is even just looking at a snake through glass, and then slowly working up to maybe touching a snake while someone else is holding it, and then gradually getting up to a point where maybe I could hold the snake with the support of someone else, and we work up the ladder of exposure. I have had ladders of exposure in my life for traumatic events, for challenging moments. And even with those ladders of exposure, I struggled when this earthquake did happen. And what in the research could I find that would explain why I was struggling so hard? And one of the ways that I tried to support myself or treat myself was gradual exposure to the earthquake, to the location where things were bad, to the place where I was when the event happened. And none of it seemed to be working for me. So I wanted to look at something different. This is where I came across the 3 key needs for belonging. Belonging builds resilience. Belonging is the step before exposure to the challenging event, to the traumatic memory. Belonging is where we need to begin. And that is the foundation of camp. We focus on the needs of belonging to build resilience. This is going to be your take-home homework for today. If you are a frontline staff, so you're a teacher, you're a nurse, you're a parent, you're a caregiver, and you are finding that your resiliency for doing your day-to-day task is wavering, I want you to assess yourself on these 3 needs. First, connection. When I was in this earthquake, I was overseas, I was in New Zealand. All my friends and family that I've had for my whole life were back in Canada. And so my connection to them was really challenging. And so I did not have strong connection to them. I also hadn't been in this specific situation before. So my connection with myself and my understanding of how I would respond in this event was wavering. Second, autonomy. That I like to think of it as feelings of control. In a natural disaster, you do not have autonomy. And so the world seems to unfold around you. And then when you start getting into the negative headspace, it feels like even more of your autonomy is stolen. So I had to pause and think about the things that had brought me autonomy before. And for me, that was exercise. So step 1 for me was building connection again, building stronger connections in my new community to help me build some resilience for what was going on, and so that I could fill myself up from within and show up better for my students. Second was building some autonomy. Autonomy for me in relation to my own relationship with myself has always been through exercise. And so even though it was the last thing I wanted to do when I was struggling with my own mental health, I started training for a run. And I knew having that big long-term goal of having a race to compete in would continue to motivate me to train, and having that daily exercise was going to help me build up my resilience. The third thing that I want you to assess for yourself, if you find that you are struggling with your own resilience, is your sense of purpose. I like thinking big picture. Where are we going? And can I work backwards from there? And big picture, how is this helping me be a part of something larger than myself? And so for myself in this circumstance, big picture, being a teacher, becoming a teacher was helping me give back in a way that it really aligned with my values, and leaning into that helped me build some resiliency and motivation to show up on those days when I really didn't want to. Big picture, giving back and leaving the world a better place than I found it has always been a huge goal of mine. And so I was able to lean into that in times of challenge. So thank you for listening to our transition for camp and listening to my story of where focusing on resilience began. I hope these 3 belonging needs feel helpful to you, something that you can lean into. So my homework for you at the end of this podcast is to write down your 3 belonging needs and start taking a guess at how you're doing in each one. Do you feel connected with yourself? Do you feel like you have some autonomy over yourself right now? And are you aligned with your big picture goal? What was that burning passion, that burning big picture idea that led you into being a frontline staff member? Whether you are a teacher or a youth care worker or social services, family support, whatever your position is, what led you there? And big picture, what do you want that to mean about you? How do you want people to explain who you are in that role and what you brought to this world? And write that big picture idea down and use that as a guiding force when you're feeling like you're on the edge of burnout, when you are feeling like your resilience is wavering. And continue to listen on to our future podcasts where we will continue to talk to experts in the field of resilience, where we will continue to share strategies directly from camp and some favorites from our most recent workshops.